What I have before you today is the M car for all seasons and all situations. This is a 2023 BMW M3 xDrive competition. And while yes, this generation of M3 and M4, the G80 and G82 respectively, have been very controversial indeed, most notably due to their polarizing front end design with those buck teeth grills. And the other thing, which is the fact that these things in the xDrive form weigh in at a staggering just under 4,000 pounds, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it really makes this gray color fitting, doesn't it? Because this is quite the elephant indeed. But it is an elephant that has done way too many drugs, so it is an absolute insane monster and predator. This generation of M3 houses the S58 3-liter twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine, which makes just over 500 horsepower. And in this car, that power is sent to not the rear wheels, but all four wheels through an 8-speed automatic transmission. So yes, it's an automatic M3, boo-hoo. It's a very fast transmission. We'll get to it in a minute. And like I've said, it is all-wheel drive, the first generation of M3 and M4 to offer all-wheel drive. Whereas before, Audi people were having all the fun during the winter and in the snow, now the BMW M guys can get in on the fun. So this M3 definitely has the performance and the numbers to match up to the M3 nameplate, but what does this have that's different from the standard G23 series? Well, pretty much everything. Take these rear wheel arches that are flared out quite a lot, and it seems like BMW didn't bother to want to redesign a new rear door for this car, I guess for cost purposes, because I think these doors are probably the only thing that is shared with the standard G23 series. It really does show this flaring in the rear wheel arch because there's this really sharp angle that I've never really liked. That's always kind of bothered me about this car. That's just nitpicking, I know, and I understand why they did that. Other than the doors and maybe the trunk lid and the rear tail lights, pretty much everything about this car that you can see on the outside is different. Again, most notably, the front end design is completely changed with bucktooth grills and a hood that is kind of shaped around them in a stylish way. And I know this is going to be controversial, but I actually really like how the M3 looks, and yes, including that front end design with the grills. Don't click off the video. Don't click off the video yet, because you're going to miss hearing the S58 rev. So let's hear that. And hopefully by the time you come back, you'll have forgotten what I said about the grills. Real quick, let's talk about what you can get when you want to get a BMW M3. The M3 starts with the M3, the basic standard M3, makes 473 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque, but the real cool thing about it is that in the standard M3 non-competition, it comes standard with a 6-speed manual and 3 pedals and sends power only to the rear wheels. So if you want to be really serious about your purity as a BMW enthusiast, the standard 6-speed manual M3 is the one to go with. And then you could step up to the M3 competition, which is what this car is. This has a power boost from 473 to 503 horsepower, also makes 70 pound-feet of torque more than the standard M3, and also is available with all-wheel drive like what this car has. The xDrive all-wheel drive shaves 3/4 of a second off of the 0 to 60 time, putting these things in the 2-second range, which is bizarre. This is a businessman's car that he's going to be driving in the left-hand lane 2 feet off of the car in front and not using his turn signal. And you're giving this guy the ability and the privilege to do 0 to 60 faster than Lamborghinis and Ferraris It's absolutely insane. But if that's not insane enough for you, you could step up to the M3 CS, which has 540 horsepower and standard all-wheel drive. Or if you want some serious track action, there's the M4 CSL, which is super lightweight. It's not, but it's lighter weight than this car is, I'm sure, and comes with sticky tires, no rear seats, bunch of carbon stuff. They're really cool. I doubt I'll ever get a chance to review one, but it would be awesome. I mentioned these specs as the pre-facelift M3. There is a facelift M3 and M4 that literally was just announced a couple months ago with power boosts, some improved tech on the inside, and a slightly different look. But before, this is what you could get with an M3. And they start just under $80,000, which is a lot of money for me. But given the performance and the miles per gallon, and hopefully a lack of breakdowns in the future, but it is an M-powered BMW, so you can't really count on that part, hopefully it's worth the money. So let's take a quick review type tour around this M3. Let's talk about boring practicality stuff real quick. Yes, that is a trunk indeed. All right, let's hear the S58 rev a couple more times. Okay. Got to do the car review thing, so let's talk about practicality, like actually. Yes, there's a trunk. It is quite well sized. Definitely you could fit some golf bags in there. You also have a handy little net and storage area on the left and a bit more storage on the right. But if that's not enough, you could pull these latches and the rear seats fold down, which is awesome. But if that's not enough, and if you're a lucky European, you could have this as an M3 Touring. But because I live in the United States of America, where we love freedom and hate wagons, we don't get the M3 Touring. All we get to drive, if I want an M3 with more practicality, all I'm able to get is an X3M. I can't drive around in an X3M because I look like every other rich white mom on their way to get their venti frappuccino from Starbucks. All right, I'll stop crying. But yeah, it's really stupid that in America, we don't get the M3 Touring. Putting aside the fact that high performance, fast wagons are very well sought after here and command much higher prices in the primary and secondary markets, BMW just didn't bother giving us the M3 Touring, the first ever M3 Touring. This was the first generation of 3 Series, by the way, that we didn't get in America as a wagon. And of course it's the first generation that got the M3 Touring. I mean, so unfair, but I digress. There is the next generation M5 on its way, and the M5 Touring, the new M5 Touring, has been confirmed for the US market. So I can't complain too much, and I'm sure one of these days I'll get to review an M5 Touring. But it's just so irritating watching Europeans drive around in their M3 Tourings. Oh mate, look at this. Oh my God, it's an estate M3. It's so much fun. And I'm just sitting there watching on the toilet, crying because we don't get the M3 Touring. Not like I could afford one of these things anyways, but you get the point. I went off on an ADHD style tangent, but yeah, that's a trunk there, definitely. And let's just close it and we can look at the least polarizing part of this car's design, the rear. I kind of thought the M3 was the car that you could use for everything, but it was still really fast. I just can't imagine showing up to a job interview or any type of like important meeting or a funeral in one of these things with these massive quad pipes on the back. I don't know if you get what I mean, but it's just, I think this car could be a lot more subtle in its design. If I were driving around and I wanted to look a little bit more under the radar and be able to take it places and not be embarrassed, I would probably just go for an M340i, but then you can't take an M340i to Cars and Coffee without people telling you it's not a real M3. I know it's not, but yeah, you get the point. Okay, I'm moving on now. All right, well, we're not going to take too much time here because if you want to know more about G20 3 Series practicality, I have a comparison video up on my channel that I'll link right now. But let's just remind ourselves how good the rear seat is for somebody who's 6'3", quite tall like I am. Okay, this driver's seat right here is in my driving position, obviously. And I have to say, this isn't even the top end competition spec seats with the carbon fiber, but the back of this seat has no give in it at all. It's very hard and you can't really use it to get comfortable back here. There's some foot room down there, but you really have to man spread to have any sort of comfort. Back here, it's quite boring. You've got no center armrest for some reason. I don't know why the M3 and M4 don't have that. It just has a pass-through, which I guess you could put your skis in this thing and drive it up to the ski resort in the winter because you've got all-wheel drive. But I think rear passengers would much rather just have an armrest. Down there's also some climate controls and 2 USB-C ports, which is awesome, but not interesting at all. And that's really the theme back here, not interesting at all. The only cool part are these M seat belts. Look at that, M stitching on the seat belts. So you can remind your children in the back just how cool you are as a dad or mom or whatever. And that's it. Let's move up front. This is where the M3 really needs to shine, the front end, the driver's seat. And we sit down and we see the benefit of these seats. They've got some extra bolstering in the sides so that it'll keep you tight around hard corners. But if this isn't enough, you can get the full end competition spec seats, which yes, look very good for track use, but are just completely vulgar and I'm not a fan at all. For some reason, for me, bucket seats in a sedan is just a huge no. Just no way, no thanks. Looking forward, I've got a nice chunky M-style steering wheel, which is basically in this car the exact same as a steering wheel you'd get in a 330i. It's just got a little bit more thickness up here and M stitching and an M logo right there. Also these M1 and M2 drive mode buttons, which we'll get to in a second. But it is basically just the exact same as a steering wheel that was in the 330i that I reviewed. And that 330i was an M Sport model. And it had M badges everywhere too, including on the steering wheel. And I love to imagine driving this car and pulling up to some guy with his 330i M Sport, and he's looking down on his M badge knowing that it's not true, knowing that he's a fraud, and then the real deal shows up and just completely leaves him in his dust. That is like something I dream about. In the center, we have the whole curved iDrive 8 display, which I've gone over probably 8,000 times. So if you want more detail on that, then go watch one of the 8,000 other BMW videos I've done. But it's got some M touches to it. And the most important part of this iDrive infotainment system in here is the M setup mode, where you can configure your engine, your chassis, your steering, your brakes, and your M xDrive. And yes, you can control the brakes. It's brake by wire, which means the brakes are controlled by electronics and a computer. And I just love imagining, because the throttle is controlled by electronics and the computer, and if there's an issue with that, it goes into limp home mode where it restricts your throttle use. You see where I'm getting with this? Can you imagine a limp home mode for your brakes in the same way that a limp home mode for your throttle and your engine is, where it only lets you use a certain amount? That's a little bit scary. I've gone over this M setup in a couple other cars. In this car, the most notable part is M xDrive, which you can set to standard four-wheel drive or four-wheel drive sport, where it puts a lot of extra bias on the rear wheels for performance driving. Or you can even turn the front wheels off completely and make it a full rear-wheel drive car for a drifting experience. I would love to be able to show that for you right now, but I would also love to be able to continue doing videos with BMW of Murray, so I don't think that's a good idea. Also, here you can set your M1 and M2 configurations which you activate with the M1 and M2 buttons on the steering wheel. So if you have one mode for when you're sad and tired, you just want to get home to your wife and kids after a stressful day of work, then you have M1 for comfort and efficient driving and all that stuff if you want. Or if you're really mad and you want to just put your foot down and really show people the M-ness and have some fun, you know, you can set another drive mode and put everything in sport, which is really cool. And the buttons are right here, so you can pretty much just switch between them as much as you see fit, as often as you want. In the center, there is a gauge cluster, M-style gauge cluster, so it's got M colors. And as you switch between modes, like you go into M Sport mode, it switches so that it has more of an emphasis on your tachometer, less of an emphasis on your speed. So all of this is different. Also, when you switch between drive modes and things like that, your heads-up display also changes. It'll change from showing you what direction you're going, showing you your navigation, to showing you just a shift light when you go through the gears, which is absolutely amazing. Like I said, underneath the hood of the new M3 lies the S58, the 3-liter twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine that powers the M3, the M2, the X3M, the X4M, the new 3-liter CSL, and the upcoming Supra GRMN. Can't think of anything else. I feel like there might be a couple that I'm missing, but yeah. In this configuration, this engine produces 503 horsepower and 476, I believe, pound-feet of torque, which is 30 horsepower more than the standard M3 and M4, and 70 more pound-feet of torque than the standard M3 and M4. Also, there are people that have been able to tune these things for over 1,000 horsepower. So this could be the next 2JZ. Maybe, except the 2JZ tends to be a reliable engine. This, I don't know. Anytime I see an M badge on an engine cover, I usually get scared and run away. High-powered, high-revving M engines don't really have the greatest reputation for reliability. I think I've heard good things about this engine in particular, but just be wary when you're getting into this car that down the line, it might ruin your life. But right now, it's really awesome. So let's get it out on the road and experience it. So once again, this is the M3 Competition. So it has 30 more horsepower and 70 more pound-feet of torque than the standard M3. Let's see what that's like real quick. Oh my God, it hauls. You definitely feel that extra horsepower and torque over the standard M3 and M4. It is insane. And honestly, I really wish this car came with a manual. And if I were to choose between a standard M3 with the manual and the M3 Competition with this automatic, I hate to say it, but I feel like maybe I would go for the Competition, because the extra power makes up for the lack of a manual transmission in my mind. And the fact that it just, when you kick it down, floor it, kick it down, it goes down a couple of gears and it just explodes into the next dimension immediately. The way this thing just flies when you put your foot down, and the sound that comes, I know it's fake sound pumped through the speakers and whatever, and that's unfortunate, but if you just tell yourself to ignore that fact and enjoy the auditory experience that was designed for your enjoyment, then you can't get that mad. Oh my God. It's 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. I absolutely fully believe that. It definitely takes a second to build up boost, but once the boost arrives, you're gone. Everybody that was at the traffic light with you when you started are in just another zip code. You could get in so much trouble with this car. Feels like 500 horsepower, absolutely. Doesn't feel like it weighs 4,000 pounds. It still handles just so insanely well. Here's a fast turn. Oh my God. This thing is like a roller coaster. It corners like a roller coaster. It is absolutely insane. The G-forces that you will experience taking one of these things through a turn too fast is absolutely crazy. And when it comes to the difference between the competition and the regular M3 and M4, you definitely notice that increase in power and the torque especially. And driving this thing, even when the engine is in efficient mode like it is right now, you get a sense that it's just fueled with pure adrenaline going through a turn. You're going through a turn, accelerating, and you know the car is just begging you to put your foot down. It really, really wants to go. If you dial it back and just drive it as a regular luxury sedan, yeah, the ride is a little bit firm and bouncy, but it's really not that bad. Maybe a little bit more uncomfortable than a standard 3 Series, but not so much more uncomfortable like you'd think, given that it's an M competition. And it's nice that I can just literally configure everything. I mean, comfort steering, switching it from comfort steering to sport steering doesn't feel like it did anything at all. And also, maybe I shouldn't test the normal or sport brakes when I'm in traffic. But I will say, in comfort mode, the brakes are already very grabby. I don't really need to know what it's like when the brakes are in sport mode. And saying brakes in sport mode is just bizarre. And I don't want to test my luck. I don't want the brakes to go into brake limp home mode. Whatever, you're driving a Prius C. You are nothing to me. You work for me. May or may not have done a little bit of a BMW maneuver by not letting a Prius C in, and then they beeped their horn at me, and I'm like, loser. You get behind the wheel of this car and you kind of adopt the mindset of the M3 driver, which is everybody else, everybody on this road, they're not as cool and as successful as I am. I need to get to my business meeting on time before you. So with that, I'm going to end the video there. Hope everybody enjoyed. Like, subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.